to go through all these different adaptations to his new environment, and can you guys think of any ways that he adapts? Because there's a lot.
Water.
Yes. Definitely his new captors who provide him with water and then finds water, he has to get used to that and adapt to that whole new way of living. And there's a good quote on page 11 in The Woman in the Dunes. It says, "The fact that the fly showed great adaptability meant that it could be at home even in unfavorable environments in which other insects could not live. For example, a desert where all other living things perished." That's almost a perfect parallel to what's kind of happening to Nicky there, because he's out in the desert and it's a new environment for him and he's not used to it, but he adapts to what his new living conditions are, because he's almost forced to. Well, he is. And so he has to adapt to living with the woman and the water and doing all the work. And then here's a couple pictures of bugs that he does mention in the novel. The Orthoptera, small winged crickets and white whiskered earwigs. There's picture one. Then the Rhinocada, red striped soldier bugs. Those are just two of the ones he mentions actually in the novel. And then ways he adapts. He has to get used to this new lifestyle of work, even though he keeps trying to escape. And he gets used to the woman, and he ends up almost falling in love with her. And then he has to, that's basically it, he has to get used to digging, and then the whole water system, and how the captors treat him, the woman. That's just the bibliography.
So, my section, I chose to show specific examples of adaptation in the Dunes. And first, I'd like to start with a little bit of history about the book. It was published in 1964, and during that time there was a Marxist revival happening, and some themes of that revival were the evils of capitalism, because Karl Marx was socialist/communist, and it kind of shows how the villagers were, they were benefiting from they were taking all the, sort of like the glory from Nicky and the woman digging the sand, but they were benefiting from it. They were selling the sand to the concrete company, but Nicky and the woman were stuck in slavery. So it kind of shows how, like even in society today, like sometimes like rich people or like heads of corporations, they're benefiting from the work of the people like in their factories or the really like low positions of the job. So it's a sort of theme. And the psychology of the mind, which is something that Nicky struggles with as he kind of tries to emotionally and mentally deal with the situation, is specific to many of Abe's different works. And that is one of the greatest conflicts within the book is Nicky's conflict with himself. I mean, even though he's being held captive by the villagers and he struggles with connecting with this woman who has sort of accepted her situation, and he doesn't at first agree with her, he still has to deal with all his inner feelings and emotions that come with being stuck in the head. And then the last theme is just kind of a general conformity in Japan that has been a theme for a long time and still is, and how like in Japan they want everything to be the same. You know, there's a lot of people, so there kind of has to all have a somewhat sense of similarity. And then some of the themes specific to the novel are familiarity, which I sort of believe is one of the reasons that Nicky chooses to stay in the pit. Can anyone explain that? Perhaps like what they think about familiarity in the novel? Emma?
Well, I feel like he had been in the hole for so long, like if he had just like left and went back to regular life, it would have just been like weird for him, because the woman told the story about that other man who had left, but then he just ended up coming back anyways because he couldn't like go back to the way it was before.
Yeah, like it's sort of like the assimilation into his previous life after being stuck in the hole for so long would be more difficult than just staying and accepting his fate of digging sand with a woman. I think that's like a big thing in the novel, especially towards the end. And then I feel like monotony is also a theme, because he's doing the same thing every day. He's digging the sand, he's fixing the water system, he's spending time with the woman, just that's all he's doing. But like it also connects to familiarity because there is a sense of comfort in the same thing. Change scares people, and so many kind of delve into monotony just so they don't have to deal with the world, which can sometimes be frightening. And that leads us to fear of the unknown. And did anyone see that in the novel that they'd like to share? And I think that it's kind of like Nikki's he realizes that his life before he was stuck in the pit wasn't that great. Like he was a teacher, but he didn't really enjoy it. He wasn't in a fulfilling relationship with his old girlfriend, and going back to that after being safe in the hole, at least he knew that each day was going to come as it would. He wouldn't have to fear anything happening to him. And it's that is a theme in the novel, and the complacency also ties into that, just kind of accepting his fate and kind of moving on in life. Also, the themes of freedom and imprisonment are present because you think that he would just desire to be free the whole time he was in the pit, but his imprisonment is what he kind of lives for almost. And there's a quote at the once we get to the quote section that kind of explains that more and how the role reversal of his opinions on freedom and imprisonment take place as the novel progresses. And here's just some more examples of it, such as he's outlook on his previous life, which kind of is part of the complacency and fear that takes place in the novel, and the woman's acceptance of her life. Can anyone think why the woman might be so accepting of her life, which is so far so horrible? Same.
Maybe it's because that's all she's known. She's come to just get used to it.
I would agree with that, and how that she's kind of, her outlook is what Nikki sort of during the course of the novel. And that kind of the next item on our list is Nikki's view on life at the end of the book. He has the opportunity to escape from the hole, but he ends up staying because he starts to develop feelings for the woman, and also because his life it wasn't good before he got in the hole. It's not really any different. Since this is an existential book, it doesn't matter. So either way, he's still going to die. It's not going to affect his existence in any way, so he stays. And that is also into the opportunities to escape their passions. And maybe there's some quotes I found that I feel represented adaptation in the novel. First one says, "One cannot do without repetition in life, like the beating of the heart, but it was also true the beating of the heart was not all there was to live, or to life." And I feel that kind of sort of represents Nikki's view at the beginning of the novel, because he sort of begins to kind of live for repetition, but at first when he resents his captors and wishes to escape, that's kind of a quote that kind of seems to stand out to me. And the second one is, "Do you shovel to survive or survive to shovel?" And this is a quote I was talking about that ties into the repetition of the novel and how it's something that Nikki kind of begins to live for, that Nikki and the woman begin to live for, because they have to do it. If they don't shovel, they're going to be swallowed by the sand pit, and the villagers their town is going to be swallowed too. And the woman says, she talks about how the villagers don't deserve to die because she doesn't want to work, and he doesn't understand that because he thinks, why would you want to help them? They hold you captive and they treat you like a slave. But it's kind of like the syndrome of Stockholm syndrome, like Connor mentioned in our first section. And then the last quote is, "Defeat begins with the fear that one has lost," and that's kind of defeat is saying that it's defeat begins with fear. If you're so afraid of something that you can't even live life, then you've already lost. You don't have anything else left for. Although that's a point of existentialism, Nikki has won because he's overcome his fear of the sand and he's just living. He doesn't care that maybe his life isn't that great, and that he could escape. He's just dealing with it, which is one of I think the best things that you can do in a hopeless situation like he is in. So we're excited. Okay, thank you.